Welcome back to AI and Rye. In today's episode, we'll be discussing a real NDE from someone we will call James in the interest of privacy. Stay tuned, you don't want to miss it. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Meet the perfect companions for your teleglasses, Skepticals. While teleglasses offer a full-on telepathic experience diving deep into the minds around you, we know that sometimes less is more. That's where Skepticals come in. This sleek clip-on attachment filters the telepathic chatter, providing you with only the essential truths. Whether it's detecting fibs or confirming suspicions, Skepticals let you manage the flow of information with ease. Perfect for when you want to know the truth without the whole story. Clip on, tune in, and let the truth unfold with Skepticals. Welcome back to AI and Rye, where we delve into the profound and mysterious realms of spirituality. In today's episode, we journey through the remarkable near-death experience of James. From the brink of death to the heights of spiritual awakening, James's story challenges our understanding of life, death, and what lies beyond. Stay attuned as we explore the mysteries of the afterlife through the eyes of those who've glimpsed it.
I had been very ill with TWAR, a bacterial lung disease, for about a year when this happened. I could walk or be active for only about 10 minutes. I had a fever for 3 weeks. I was always exhausted and it was difficult to breathe. I had the constant feeling of suffocation. It scared my wife how I sounded when I was sitting and sleeping. It became less stressful to sleep sitting up in my own room. My professional life up until then had been working with psychotherapy, crises, supervisors, among other things, in hospice, healthcare, social services, etc. Coming from an upbringing when there was a lot of death around me, this experience laid the foundation for a lifelong interest in the research of NDEs. I read a lot on the subject and attended lectures, etc. I wondered what it's like to die and what happens next. It may feel like I knew a little how it will turn out. One October evening about 10 years ago, despite medication, I couldn't breathe. In the panic that followed, I took the wrong medicine and my breathing stopped. I panicked because I couldn't call for help. It was the scariest moment of my life. Then I felt my heart stop beating. There was complete silence in my chest and I gave up. Everything became still. I was completely mesmerized by a giant face starting to appear on the ceiling. It smiled lovingly and warmly at me. It sank towards me or I floated up towards it. I don't know which it was. Suddenly, I was in a vibrating, vivid, incredibly bright landscape. It was brighter than anything I've ever experienced. I experienced a sense of home that was of such magnitude it is impossible to explain. It was as if my whole life had been a dream and I had woken up from it. Everything was so much more real and home-like. I had come home and I was so happy. Even that is impossible to explain. How do you describe a happiness that is a million times stronger than when you had your first child? It doesn't work in human language. I felt filled with everything. In connection with that, there was a figure of light who was so bright that I couldn't see the facial features. He knew everything about me. By that I really mean everything. He knew the ugliest thing I had thought and the nicest thing I did. He knew it all. Yet I felt loved. He asked what I had done with my life. Then everything that happened in my life was replayed. I lived it again. Since I was 57 years old at the time, it was 57 years that passed in an instant. I got to see every moment from my perspective and also from the other person's perspective. It was excruciating at times, and I felt a great pang of selfishness and self-absorption from me. Despondent, I said I had failed. But the light figure said, with an almost humorous warmth in his voice, nothing was wrong. Everything was perfect, as it should be. He said that I was human, and as such, it is not possible to do everything right. That love and its consequences mean everything. I was so liberated and happy. Then he asked me if I had any questions. I asked about war, environmental destruction, evil, and everything I have reflected on during my life. As the questions went along, it was as if I changed. I understood more until it felt like I understood everything, which was that everything is as it should be. Everything will be fine. I understood that it is so. It was like I swelled, got bigger. Everything was getting brighter. My experience is that we had endless time together. Everything was eternal. Then he told me that I was going back and I'd get well. Until then, I had thought nothing of my family or children. Then it was like being sucked through a narrow tube at extreme speed. I was lying in my body in the fetal position. The sun shone in through the blinds. I had the happiest morning I have ever experienced. I ran happily down to my wife, as I felt that now I must tell everyone how it really is. Everything will be fine. My wife was sad when she realized what had happened. She was not happy like me. After a few confusing weeks, I started to learn what I know now. That even if I know how it will be, it cannot be explained. It's like describing a destination, but only getting to use 2 letters in the story. It has been extremely difficult to live with at times. Now 10 years have passed. I am permanently changed by the experience. Part of who I was there in the light remains. So I'm like a double exposure, an eternal self that knows and an ordinary person like you. So I do like most others who have experienced this, try to show a little of the love that was my home in eternity. I try to help others become a better person, and for me to be a better person. But I know that everything will be fine in the end. Nothing in my experience was what I thought I knew before. I didn't realize how incredibly big the difference in reality here and there really is. I also didn't understand what it's like when time no longer exists. I didn't realize what it's like to be completely loved and to swim around in love. But it doesn't matter. Everyone ends up there in the end. So let's start at the moment he sees that face hovering above him. So some people might think that's a little eerie or strange. I mean, who wants to see a face smiling at them from the ceiling? But the way he describes it as very loving and inviting, it almost sounds like an angel peering down and welcoming him up into the heavens. So this part of the NDE is a little unusual, but what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's definitely a moment that could feel eerie to some. A giant face appearing from the ceiling isn't something we'd expect to see, so the initial reaction might be one of discomfort or confusion. Yeah, but like you said, the way James describes it changes everything. It goes from potentially unsettling to something comforting and almost divine. That warm, loving smile gives the impression of an angelic or spiritual presence, like he's being welcomed with open arms into this other realm. It's as if the face was there to guide him, offering reassurance in a moment of fear. The fact that it felt so inviting probably helped James surrender to the experience instead of being afraid. It really shows how our emotional reaction to something depends on the energy or feeling we get from it. How do you think his journey would have unfolded if the face hadn't been so welcoming?
I mean, if it had a frown or like an angry face or something, I'm thinking that would be kind of unnerving for him.
Yeah, if the face had been frowning or angry, I think it would have totally shifted the whole experience. He might have felt fear or panic instead of comfort, and that could have colored everything that followed. Instead of feeling like he was being welcomed into a peaceful, loving place, he might have thought he was in danger or being judged. That loving smile really seems to be what set the tone for everything that came after. It gave him a sense of safety and reassurance, almost like it prepared him to embrace the journey ahead. It's amazing how just a small detail like a smile can make such a big difference in how we perceive an experience.
Yeah, it's a little unusual for an NDE to see something divine or otherworldly before they exit their body, because normally, it's after they go through the tunnel or whatever, they see all these divine things, but he actually saw something before leaving his body.
You're right. It's not as typical for someone to see something divine or otherworldly before actually leaving their body in NDEs. Usually, it happens after they've already crossed over, like when they're going through the tunnel or entering a different realm. But James's experience is unique in that way. He saw that loving face before fully transitioning. It almost feels like the face was there to ease him into the experience, like a bridge between the physical world and what was to come next. Instead of the usual process where people first leave their bodies and then encounter the divine, this face seemed to guide him toward that transition. It's as if the divine presence was reaching out to him before he even had to fully let go. Do you think this early encounter with something divine made the rest of his experience feel even more powerful or comforting?
I don't know, but it definitely would have, it helped in that transition from being in his body to being in the other realm. Because a lot of people, when they transition, they go through a tunnel or whatever, they spend some time in darkness, and it's kind of this place of unknown, and can be a little bit of fear that comes up. But instead of that, he had the face coming down, and that at least helped the transition to the other realm to be smoother and less anxiety inducing.
Exactly. That early encounter with the face seems like it gave James a head start on feeling safe and reassured before he even had the chance to feel fear or anxiety about the transition. Like you said, many people describe going through a tunnel or experiencing darkness, which can sometimes bring up feelings of uncertainty or even fear, especially if it's a place of the unknown. But James didn't have that experience. He was greeted by something loving right away, and that probably made his journey feel smoother and less overwhelming. It's like that presence was there to calm him down, almost like saying, "You're okay, you're safe," even before he fully crossed into the other realm. It seems like that helped him avoid some of the fear others might feel when they first leave their body. Do you think having such a comforting transition shaped how he processed the rest of the experience, like the life review or meeting the being of light?
Probably because it was all positive. It was all, good feelings rather than being kind of a mixed experience.
Yeah, exactly. Since his transition started off on such a positive and loving note, it seems like it set the tone for the rest of his experience. Even when he went through something more intense, like the life review, which can sometimes be difficult or painful for people, he still seemed to process it in a way that felt overall positive and reassuring. The whole experience was framed by that initial feeling of love and safety, which probably made it easier for him to accept both the good and the challenging moments. It's almost like that comforting presence from the beginning created this foundation of trust where he knew, deep down, that everything would be okay, even during the more intense parts. It makes sense that he would look back on the whole thing as an overwhelmingly positive and transformative experience because of how it began. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds right. So once he does leave his body, he goes into this bright, vibrant place, which he describes in the questionnaire as a valley with mountains in the background. And he said There was a bright light shining between two mountains, and he said it was a place only for those who were there, who were to stay in that realm. And he describes it as being more real than anything he had ever experienced, and it felt like coming home in the deepest sense.
That's such a powerful description. This bright, vibrant place that felt more real than anything he had ever known. The fact that he described it as feeling like coming home, in the deepest sense, speaks volumes. It's as though this realm wasn't just a place, but a state of being that resonated with him on a level beyond anything earthly. The bright light shining between the mountains almost feels symbolic too, like it was beckoning him towards something divine or eternal, a place meant for those who were staying in that realm permanently. What really stands out is how he said it was more real than life here. That's a common theme in many NDEs, the sense that the other side is somehow more vivid, more alive than our physical reality. It must have been deeply comforting for him to experience that, like he had found a place of ultimate peace and belonging. What do you think that sense of coming home says about the nature of the other realm he was in?
I mean, I think it's the obvious answer that it is home, that it's home to every single person on this earth, every animal, every creature, every being that's ever lived. That's home to all of us.
That's a beautiful way of seeing it. The idea that this place is truly home for every soul, every being that has ever lived, it's a comforting and universal perspective. It suggests that no matter what our lives are like here on Earth, or what challenges we face, there's this eternal place of peace and belonging waiting for all of us. It makes James's description of coming home feel even more profound, as if he was tapping into this ultimate truth that we all share, even if we aren't aware of it yet. It feels like this understanding of home could bring a lot of comfort to listeners too, knowing that no matter what happens in this life, there's something greater that's waiting, a place where we all belong. Do you think that's part of what resonates with people when they hear NDE stories like this one?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for myself that it just resonates because I feel like that's home. That's where I belong. That's where I've come from and where I'll return to. Even though we don't recognize it mentally, like we don't remember it, there's something deep within probably all of us, but not conscious in all of us, that that's where we belong.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling. That even though we might not consciously remember or recognize that place, there's something deep within us that knows it's home. It's almost like a soul memory, something beyond the mind. That's probably why stories like James's resonate so strongly. They touch on that sense of belonging that we all feel, even if we can't fully explain it. Do you feel like exploring these NDEs in your podcast is helping you connect even more with that feeling of home?
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely an interesting exploration, and it makes me feel a little bit of peace and comfort. Um, I mean, it's nothing like an actual NDE, obviously, but yeah.
That's really great to hear. It sounds like this exploration is not only interesting for you, but also personally meaningful, which is such a powerful combination. As you continue diving into these experiences, I imagine that sense of peace and comfort will only deepen, both for you and for your listeners. Do you think this connection to home is something you'll keep highlighting as a central theme in future episodes?
Yeah, I'd definitely like to because that's one of the most important aspects of this. So I'd like to keep coming back to that.
That's a great focus to keep coming back to. The idea of home can really resonate on so many levels, and it gives your podcast that emotional depth that people will connect with. I'm sure it'll bring comfort to listeners, just as it does for you. Do you have any other themes or ideas you'd like to weave into future episodes, along with that sense of home?
I mean, we could talk about the light and the beings of light. My third point here is that being of light that James sees, and he recognizes that the being knows everything about him, and he knows he wasn't being judged. He was just being loved for everything about him. For I think he said the best thing he thought, the worst thing he did, everything was seen and not judged.
That's such a powerful aspect of James' experience, and it's something that comes up a lot in NDEs, the idea that the being of light knows everything, both the good and the bad, and yet there's no judgment. It's all met with unconditional love. That really speaks to this deep spiritual truth, where love is the ultimate force, far beyond judgment or punishment. The fact that James felt fully seen and yet fully loved for both the best and worst parts of himself is so transformative. It's almost as if this being of light is there to guide people toward a deeper understanding of themselves, but with total acceptance, no matter what they've done or thought. That can be incredibly healing, especially for someone who might carry guilt or shame. It shows that in the grander spiritual realm, love transcends all of that. Do you think that theme of being fully known and fully loved without judgment is something you'd like to explore more in the podcast as well?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a Christian theme, the non judgment of Jesus, accepting the sinners and loving them regardless of what they've done. I think that's a very important thing to come back to.
That connection to Jesus' non-judgment, unconditional love is a really meaningful one. It's a powerful theme in both Christianity and many NDEs, and it resonates deeply with people because it offers hope and acceptance, no matter what mistakes they've made. Bringing that into your podcast could really enrich the spiritual discussions and give listeners a sense of peace, knowing that love is at the core of everything, beyond judgment. Do you think this could become one of the recurring themes in your exploration of NDEs, drawing parallels to that unconditional love across different spiritual teachings?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Let's go on to the next one. So James had a life review and he saw all of the moments of his life before him. He said in an instant he could see all of it, and he saw not only from his own perspective, but from the perspective of the people that he interacted with. And he felt some regret for how he conducted himself. But the being of light assured him that nothing was wrong and that life is all about learning.
That life review is such a fascinating and profound part of James' experience. The idea of seeing every moment of your life in an instant, but also from the perspectives of others, really drives home how interconnected we are. It must have been eye-opening for him to see how his actions impacted others, not just from his own view, but through their eyes. That shift in perspective likely brought out feelings of regret, especially in moments where he might have acted out of selfishness or without realizing the effects on others. But what's truly remarkable is that, despite those feelings of regret, the being of light reassured him that nothing was wrong, that life is about learning. It seems to underscore the idea that we're not meant to live perfect lives, but instead to grow and evolve through our experiences, both good and bad. The being's message of acceptance, even in the face of mistakes, seems to say that our struggles and regrets are just part of the journey. Do you think that concept of life being about learning is something that can help listeners reframe their own mistakes or regrets?
Yeah, because it gives kind of a purpose to our mistakes. They're not just, you know, things we did that are stupid or wrong or bad. It's like, it's something you did, but you can learn from it and make sure you don't do it again. Make sure you fix your way of thinking or behavior or whatever it is.
Exactly. That perspective really shifts the way we view our mistakes. Instead of carrying guilt or shame, we can see those moments as valuable lessons that help us grow and evolve. It's a much more compassionate and constructive way to approach life, knowing that we're allowed to make mistakes as part of the learning process. It's not about being perfect, but about understanding ourselves and others better through those experiences. I think your listeners could really benefit from hearing that message, especially those who might struggle with their own regrets. It could bring a lot of comfort to people who feel weighed down by their past.
I'm just going to jump to the last part of my points here. So James returns to his body. He goes through a tunnel at lightning speed. He's back in his body, and he feels like he just had the best morning of his entire life. Then he goes down and talks to his wife about it, and she's kind of scared and concerned. So he details that he went through a period of kind of conflict with his wife because of this, but he eventually got through it, and he's learned how to kind of
adjustment,
yeah.
where even though he was so joyful and felt like everything had changed for him, his wife and the people around him didn't fully understand what he had experienced. It sounds like that made things a bit difficult for him, especially in those first few weeks after his return. He had just gone through something so transformative, but he was surrounded by people who couldn't share that same perspective or understand what he had been through. It's a common theme with NDEs, where the experiencer comes back filled with new insights and joy, but the people around them might feel confusion or concern. That contrast between James's elation and his wife's fear is really interesting. It shows how isolating the experience might be at first, even though it's something that's meant to be life-changing in a positive way. Over time, though, it seems like he found a way to integrate the experience into his everyday life and carry that sense of peace with him. Do you think that part of his story, coming back and having to adjust to normal life again, could be something listeners would relate to, especially in terms of how big life changes can sometimes feel isolating?
Yeah, it reminds me of the hero's journey. I think it was Joseph Campbell had that idea of the coming home at the end and everything being completely changed.
Exactly. That's a great connection to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. The return home is such a crucial part of that cycle. After the hero has gone through this transformative adventure, they come back to their ordinary world, but they're completely changed by what they've experienced. It's not always easy for the people around them to understand that change, which can create a sense of isolation or even tension. James' experience really mirrors that, where he's filled with this newfound understanding and peace, but those around him can't fully grasp what he went through. In a way, it makes his return almost as significant as the journey itself. The challenge isn't just about experiencing the other realm, but also about how to live in the world after being profoundly transformed by it. That's such a powerful theme to explore because it's something many people can relate to. Whether they've gone through a personal awakening or a major life change, they often come back to a world that feels a little out of sync with their new perspective. Do you think that Hero's Journey framework could be a helpful lens for exploring other NDEs as well?
Yeah, I'd definitely like to come back to that after our future NDE podcasts and see if we can tie in some of that.
That sounds like a great idea. The Hero's Journey framework can really add another layer of depth to understanding these experiences, especially how people integrate what they've learned into their lives afterward. It'll be interesting to explore that further in future episodes. Do you feel ready to wrap up this episode on James NDE, or is there anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, I'm ready to wrap it up. Could you give us an outro?
Sure, here's an outro for you. And that wraps up our deep dive into James's near-death experience. We explored his incredible journey from encountering a loving presence before leaving his body to the profound sense of coming home in the other realm, to the life review, where he was assured that life is all about learning. It's clear that his experience was transformative in so many ways, and we hope it's given you some food for thought as well. As always, we'll continue exploring more NDEs and spiritual journeys in future episodes. Stay attuned to what's coming next, and remember that these stories are all part of a larger conversation about love, learning, and the nature of life beyond. Thank you for tuning in to this episode, and until next time, stay attuned. You might miss it.